In this video we are going to take a closer look at the Codex Imperial Agents that was leaked last week, which brings significant changes to the Deathwatch as we currently know them. This review is aimed at Deathwatch players wondering about the future of their armies, and as such will be limited to the parts relevant for the Deathwatch. In the first part, we will go through the relevant rules for playing Deathwatch units as part of Codex Imperial Agents, as well as using them in other armies. In the second part, we will then look at how Deathwatch can still be played after the official release of this codex. Lastly, there will be a quick wrap-up of what has been covered.
Welcome to SwissHammer, your channel for modeling in Warhammer 40k. My name is Tammer, and I will be guiding you through this video.
Diving right into the rules part of Codex Imperial Agents, I think what sets this one apart from other releases is that Imperial Agents were primarily intended to be included into other armies through their assigned agents rule, but now GW has decided to not only consolidate all those datasheets into a single codex, but also give them standalone army rules. That this is a double-edged sword starts with the army rule itself, which is pretty much allowing you to either include assigned agents into other armies as we know them, or play a standalone army by picking one out of 4 available detachments in this book. So yes, that's right, the army rule for playing the standalone army is basically that the army exists. This should already raise some red flags by itself. Now, all that talk about Imperial Agents, but how exactly does that tie into the Deathwatch? The important part here is that Codex Imperial Agents replaces the Deathwatch index for 10th edition. This means all that's left of Deathwatch rules is now in Codex Imperial Agents, which translates into datasheets and detachments. Starting with the datasheets, because I think those are paramount for Deathwatch players to judge the rest of the rules. Here a quick follow-up to the preview I did on Codex Imperial Agents a while ago. Back then, I speculated that the mixed kill teams will most likely disappear from the codex and perhaps be made available through Legends datasheets. And much to my dismay, this was in fact already confirmed to be correct in a previous article published on Warhammer Community. The Deathwatch Proteus, Indomitor, Fortis and Spectre's kill teams, as well as the named kill team Cassius, will no longer be supported in competitive play, and we can expect Legends datasheets to be available as a free download on Warhammer Community. As such, these datasheets are absent from Codex Imperial Agents. The only Deathwatch datasheets that are left for us to pick from are Deathwatch Veterans, aka the Deathwatch Kill Team, the Watchmaster, Watch Captain Artemis and the Corvus Blackstar. That's right, just like the named kill teams, Deathwatch Terminators are also gone for good. Looking at the datasheets themselves, the first major change is that none of them have the Adeptus Astartes keyword anymore, but gain Deathwatch and Ordocenos instead. The loss of the Adeptus Astartes keyword is huge, as it means that whenever they are assigned to other Space Marine armies, they won't profit from oaths and stratagems anymore. Going quickly through the datasheets themselves, Watch Captain Artemis is basically Watch Lieutenant Artemis now, giving lethal hits to the unit he is attached to. Certainly decent and preferable over his previously broken rule. For the Watchmaster, he keeps shoot and charge after advancing for his unit, as well as the Captain's Rights of Battle ability, but his Vect is gone for good. A nerf if anything. Then moving on to the Deathwatch Kill Team, which is basically the Deathwatch Veteran datasheet. Here the good news is that they retain Battle Line with an OC value of 2, as well as their Death to the Alien ability, but that's basically it. War gear options are worse than before, basically GW sticking to what can be built from the box, meaning for every 5 models, only 1 frag cannon or Infernus heavy bolter can be taken. The ranged weapons changed quite a bit in general, with the long vigil entries gone, and some stuff like combi weapons, stalkers and shotguns returning, but let's say these profiles are nothing to write home about in the first place. I think the important takeaway here is that the ranged output suffers greatly, while melee loadouts retain their potential. For 5 veterans, it's still possible to get in 2 hammers and 2 shields, which is slightly worse than before, but still makes for a decent unit overall. Last and certainly least, the Corvus Blackstar basically remains as it is, and further bad news is that while it is a transport, it is no dedicated transport, meaning that it will be limited to agents of the Imperium standalone armies only. For the rest of the datasheets, we will find Inquisitors, Assassins, which are looking really strong now, as well as the various Inquisitorial Agents, Navy Breachers, Arbites and so on and so forth. I am not going to go through these individually, but I think what's important to mention is that this codex severely lacks anti-armor options, meaning that we would have to rely on the Corvus Blackstar, which is very swingy as a gun platform, or add Imperial Knights, neither of which I think is an ideal option. What further stands out here is the Navigator datasheet, which provides the equivalent of an Infiltrator Deep Strike Denial bubble, but as the Navigator has a weak defensive profile and isn't a lone operative, we would have to give him Navy Breachers or Void's Men-at-Arms for extra protection. Not ideal, but the option is there. Moving on to the detachments, as previously mentioned, there are 4 to pick from, 3 of which are dedicated to a main ordo, and the 4th being kind of a mix-it-all style of detachment. Purgation Force is Ordo Hereticus, and Demon Hunters is Ordo Malleus. I'm going to skip those 2 as they are not relevant for Deathwatch. Instead, we get a dedicated Alien Hunters aka Ordo Xenos detachment, which is a toned-down version of what used to be the Black Spear Task Force. Yes, that's right, one of the most underperforming detachments has been made worse. When picking this detachment, we get Deathwatch mission tactics as we know it, affecting only units with the Deathwatch keyword, aka our 4 remaining datasheets. Moving on to the enhancements, we get to keep the Beacon and Chalice, as well as the underwhelming Osseous Key, now renamed Amulet of Auto-Chastisement. Both of these are Watchmaster exclusive. Then things get even worse, as Tome and Thief of Secrets are gone, which will be sorely missed. Instead, we get Universal Anathema, giving melee weapons of the Bearer Anti-Infantry 2+, and Anti-Monster 4+. These work on Agents of the Imperium models, so those are not tied to Deathwatch units exclusively. Lastly, Blackweave Shroud is again something for Agents of the Imperium models, giving the Bearer a 4+ Feel No Pain. Overall, a straight downgrade from the Black Spear Task Force enhancements. Moving on to the stratagems, these are basically the same as we previously had, except that Teleportarium got renamed to Rapid Tactical Relocation, and all of them now only work on a single unit, aka this is once again a downgrade when compared to what we previously had. Of special note here is Special Issue Ammunition, which has already been endlessly butchered over the course of 10th edition, but one has to let this sink in now. Basically, it's almost exclusively Deathwatch veterans that could put this to good use, but of course their shooting profile has been nerfed, and we would want to run them with melee loadouts at this point, so basically we once again have half the stratagems in our detachment that are close to useless. All in all, this is Deathwatch done dirtier than dirty. Then lastly, we have the Imperialist fleet detachment, as was previewed on Warhammer Community, which isn't directly aimed at Deathwatch datasheets, but it comes with a solid bunch of rules that can at the very least compete with what we would get in Alien Hunters instead, especially if we are including a navigator and an assassin, which I would consider mandatory picks for any agents of the Imperium standalone army. With the rules content down of the way, what does this mean for the Deathwatch? Well, let's not kid ourselves here, this is bad. As far as I can tell, there are 3 ways left for a former Deathwatch player to continue in this edition. First, coming closest to the Blackspear Task Force rules, we could play an Agents of the Imperium army with the Alien Hunters detachment. Through that, we keep mission tactics, Beacon and Chalice and the stratagems as we knew them, and since Deathwatch veterans are still battle line, we can include 6x10 veterans, aka our list would contain up to 60 Deathwatch veterans, some Deathwatch characters, and 1 to 3 Corvus Blackstars. The remaining points would then have to be filled up with other datasheets from Codex Imperial Agents, including an assassin, navigator plus a protective unit, and whatever else could complement such a list, potentially knights as well. However, having said that, at this point we are abandoning the whole range of Space Marine units available in the Space Marine Codex, and this sort of list would struggle immensely in competitive play. Along those same lines, we could play with the Imperialist fleet detachment, but that won't really be playing Space Marines either. As a second option, as was advertised on Warhammer Community, we could pick a Space Marine chapter and detachment from Codex Space Marine, neither of which is Deathwatch at all, then bring up to 2 units of Deathwatch veterans and or 2 Deathwatch characters, no Corvus Blackstar for that matter, and to make matters worse, none of these Deathwatch units will have the Adeptus Astaris keyword, so they won't benefit from oaths or stratagems, what a joke, and then we have our Deathwatch modeled and painted Space Marine army that basically plays by the rules of any of the Codex compliant Space Marine chapters. I am struggling to maintain composure here, as this is the ultimate insult. I mean, GW, if you wanted to drop a standalone faction from the game, at least man up and straight out say it, instead of serving us this bullshit. Playing a non-Deathwatch Space Marine chapter with a bunch of Deathwatch datasheets that are not even considered to be Space Marines anymore, I have no words for this, other than the big irony here being that any non-Space Marine army will most likely have a blast bringing 2 squads of our veterans, epic fail in all regards. Then third, and this pains me to say as much as the second option, once the mixed kill team datasheets become available through Legends, we could try to make the Alien Hunters detachment work by basically filling out the list with kill teams, depends a bit on keywords, and or just go full house rules and stick to playing the Deathwatch 10th edition index as it is. This is of course suboptimal from a competitive perspective, as one would basically have to stick to casual games among friends and Deathwatch supporters, not necessarily the kind of outlook one would like. All in all, Codex Imperial Agents fails to deliver a real solution to continue playing a main Deathwatch Space Marine army, and I wanted to get this message out to my fellow Deathwatch players before Codex Imperial Agents officially hits the shelf, as I think this is the kind of information I would personally like to know in order to make an informed decision about future purchases. To be clear here, I have no gripe with the concept of Codex Imperial Agents. On the contrary, I think GW pulled something interesting here by providing full army rules. But just like the Sisters of Battle and Grey Knights can coexist with a full codex of their own, Deathwatch could have been allowed to retain their already existing index, even if no codex was on the near horizon. Instead, getting a downgrade of a detachment that does no longer support generic Space Marine datasheets simply kills Deathwatch as a Space Marine faction, leaving only a handful of datasheets to be played in what can only be described as a soup-style army that has nothing in common with playing Space Marines. And to be clear here, I perfectly understand that some players will be thrilled about playing a full Inquisition style army, and from a fluff perspective, I can completely relate, but again, why not do it like with Sisters of Battle and Grey Knights, and let those kinds of playstyles coexist? Anyway, in closing, Codex Imperial Agents from a Deathwatch perspective is a complete failure, and the empty promises on Warhammer community about continuing playing a Deathwatch Space Marine army are nothing short of insulting. I will leave it at that. To wrap things up, over the course of the video, we have looked at the leaked Codex Imperial Agents and what it means for the Deathwatch. Unfortunately, I think we can safely say that the worst fears have come true, and Deathwatch as a standalone Space Marine army is about to be discontinued from a rules perspective. Codex Imperial Agents replaces our existing Deathwatch index, and our Black Spear Task Force detachment lives on as a weaker version, that such a thing is even possible, in the shape of the Alien Hunters detachment. As it currently stands, the two official ways to still play what could be referred to as Deathwatch is to either play an Agents of the Imperium army, picking either the mentioned Alien Hunters or the Imperialist fleet detachment. We can then still pick from 4 dedicated Deathwatch datasheets, namely the Kill Team aka Deathwatch Veterans, the Watchmaster, Watch Lieutenant Artemis and the Corvus Blackstar. Any additional datasheets have to be drawn from Imperial Agents, aka no more mixed kill teams, or any generic Space Marine datasheets. While Codex Imperial Agents offers a wide range of mostly decent datasheets, the army as a whole lacks focus, a proper army rule, as well as some anti-tank options. I think this is simply the result of throwing a bunch of models from a wide range of different game systems together and calling it a codex. As an alternative, we can pick a Space Marine chapter and detachment from the Space Marine Codex, paint it like Deathwatch, and throw in 2 squads of Deathwatch veterans and Deathwatch characters that won't get Space Marine rules support and call it playing Deathwatch. What a low blow, GW, what a low blow. Mixed kill teams might return at a later point through Legends datasheets, at least giving some additional options to players going the more casual approach. All in all, while I think that the overall concept of Codex Imperial Agents is interesting as such, having sacrificed the Deathwatch in the process sits ill with me, and I will refrain from advertising this codex any further on this channel beyond what directly affects Deathwatch. It's now up to each main Deathwatch player to make their own decisions about how to proceed with their armies from here on. So that's it for the leaked Codex Imperial Agents and what it means for the Deathwatch. How do you guys feel about the future of the Deathwatch, and how are you going to play your models after the release of Codex Imperial Agents? Any other factions you are planning to look into at this point? Let me know in the comments. Then finally, if you made it this far and I still have your attention, if you like my content, any additional support is greatly appreciated, as it helps me invest into future videos. For that, I have both a Ko-fi as well as a Patreon page, links are in the description. Furthermore, I would also like to mention that there is a SwissHammer Facebook page where I will be posting links to my videos as well as articles I find of interest. I do read a lot about the hobby, but not all of it will always end up as its own video. I look forward to seeing you there as well. As always, thank you very much for watching, guys. Your continued support is greatly appreciated. I hope you have been enjoying this video, give me a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks again and see you next time.